Okay, so we have had the second match of week 1 go through now. This time it was BIGGYCHEESE versus Knights of the Barstool. That's a Nurgle team versus Bretonnian team. 1-0 in Nurgle's favor. I was actually watching this one while it was being played, so I have some things kind of noted to talk about. But overall, I'd say that it went pretty well for both teams. Obviously, Nurgle clearly end up getting a lot more skill points here, but I mean, that's kind of to be expected. You can see because he's getting 2 skill points on these players that they were injuries. That 3 there, that's going to be touchdown, 5 from the MVP, so pretty good for the Nurgle player off this one. Before I get started on the replay though, I think I'll go ahead and just look at Bretonnian versus Nurgle in general before I start that, because it's a little bit easier to look at. So let's take a look at the Bretonnian team first. So Bretonnians only have 3 different players. They have linemen, blitzers, and blockers, right? And the thing to note here is that their linemen are very cheap. They start with skills on all players, which is usually not the case. On linemen, you normally don't start with the skill on most teams. Here they start with Fend, which is a nice skill. It makes it so that when they get hit, the person that hit them cannot follow up their attack, which really slows down the opposition. So it's a good defensive skill to have. Lets you really, you know, make it so that you can make these drives last as long as possible and stop the opponent from scoring. That being said, their linemen only have 7 armor. That's below average. So when they do get hit, they're going to get injured more, and they have below average agility. So probably not going to be doing a whole lot of dodging. These guys are literally meant to be peasants, whereas the better players on the team are meant to be like feudal lords. So they're meant to be expendable. They're meant to get hit. Not a big deal. Being linemen, they only have access to general skills. That's not really much of a surprise. You can see here, by the way, that it shows the skill access. So they get access to every level of general skills. On doubles rolls, they get access to agility, passing, strength. I might make, you know, some kind of short video explain the leveling process for people, just in case that would help out. I don't know. We'll see. Moving on, the other players that the Bretonnians have are blockers. Now, this is going to be the only player on the Bretonnian team that has normal access to strength skills, which, you know, you're normally going to have at least like 1 player on your team that has access to the strength skills, if not more, depending on what kind of team that you're playing. And it's important that you have some player that's going into strength skills, because you need somebody who's good at knocking stuff down, and at the very least, you need somebody who can get the guard skill to help you with marks, depending on if you're playing a more fragile team or something like that. They start with Wrestle. This is a really nice skill to have. It's Wrestle is the counter to block, but they kind of occupy a middle ground. I don't think that you can have block and wrestle on one player. I'm pretty sure they cancel each other out. Could be wrong about that. So you can see here that what the wrestle skill does is that if you get the both down result on a die roll, it allows you to knock both players down, and neither of you roll for armor. Neither of you take injury rolls, which is nice because it can stop your player from getting hurt and still allow them to knock somebody else down. It also means that you don't suffer a turnover if you use this skill, unless the player that you've controlled that's using it is the one that's using wrestle and they're holding the ball. Otherwise, it's a good way to eliminate some players. Typically going to be the ball carriers who you're using this on, but it lets you knock down players that have that block skill that are normally hard to get at, and get them out of the way without risking yourself. So that's really nice. Like I said, you're mainly going to be using this on a ball carrier, because typically when somebody levels a ball carrier up, they're going to have block, and ideally dodge as well, which makes it very difficult to take them down normally. So this is a good skill to have right here. Easy access to strength skills every level. Pretty average stats otherwise. Nothing to talk about there, really. And then we have the Blitzer. This is the key player for the Bretonnians. Bretonnians, by the way, can have 4 of each positional player. So being able to have 4 Blitzers and 4 blockers is pretty nice. If we go ahead and take a look at the Blitzer here. Starts with block, excellent. Starts with catch, pretty nice. And starts with Dauntless, which if you watch the last video, know the Dauntless it can be very helpful when going up against higher strength teams. So the Blitzer is able to actually dish out a bit of damage on his own, almost as if he were that kind of, aggressive killing player. The problem is the Blitzer for the Bretonnians does not have easy access to strength skills, which is something that Blitzers on pretty much every other team do have. You're forced into agility and passing skills for the most part. So when it comes to playing the Blitzer, they're more likely going to be in a position where they are trying to guide the ball to the end zone. And there are some skills in the agility and passing trees as well that will allow you to kind of help out your team on a more macro level in terms of rerolls and stuff like pro, leader, whatnot. But you're not going to be able to make a killer out of a Blitzer very reliably, which is unfortunate because they would otherwise be well suited to doing it. Having block and Dauntless would make them excellent killers, but probably just not going to happen. Otherwise, normal strength, normal agility. Despite being a ball runner, having normal agility means he's not actually going to be that good at dodging. Even if you do get the dodge skill, it's probably not going to be that great. Having one more agility is far better than having a free reroll on a dodge. Generally, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's more reliable, I believe. The 3 strength, not too big of a deal. Like I said, has Dauntless, which lets them kind of break through the enemy line and get past any higher strength opponents that might run into them. But at the same time, again, Dauntless doesn't work when you're the one being attacked, so that doesn't always work. 7 movement allowance, that's pretty good. And since they have the agility and passing, they can easily get pass on another player. You could turn one Blitzer into a thrower, or, have multiple of them have throws so you can keep tossing the ball around. And that would be, somewhat reliable. With 3 agility, it's not the best, but it's also not a terrible idea, honestly. All right, and then we go ahead and look at the Nurgle team. Nurgle has 4 different players. They have their Rotters, which just standard linemen, nothing special here, aside from some specific Nurgle traits. That is, 1, Nurgle's Rot. Basically, when you kill an enemy player, there are some requirements here in the description, but this basically boils down to somebody who's like humanoid lineman, essentially. If you kill that player, they will be added to your team as a free lineman, which is pretty nice. It means that you don't have to worry too much about losing your linemen, and you ideally are going to end up having some surplus players most of the time, especially once you start leveling up your Nurgle warriors. The other trait he has here is Decay. Essentially what this means is that when there is an injury roll, a casualty on the player, you actually get 2 of them. That means that if your Rotter gets injured, the likelihood of you getting a really bad injury is much higher now. And chances are that it would probably be easier to either fire this player or just replace him with a free one. Luckily, they're only 40,000 to begin with, so they're really not that important anyway. Now, being a Nurgle team, the linemen only have access to general skills, but they also have access to mutations. Mutations are a special set of skills that are only reserved for a few teams. I think there's only 4 of them. I think it's Chaos, Nurgle, Skaven, and Underworld Denizens. I don't believe any other team in Blood Bowl 2 at least has access to the skills. And these kind of cover a lot of bases. You have skills under mutations that will allow you to be a more effective hitter, skills that will let you be a more effective thrower, runner, catcher, all kinds of things. So there's a lot of options that get opened up when you have access to mutations. And the fact that he has easy access to mutations is really nice. You're going to find that a lot of teams that run mutations are probably going to go for those first over other things. Not always, but most of the time there's a mutation that really fills a nice niche that they want to grab first. Now, the next player on the Nurgle team is the Pestigore. This is your most likely going to be your ball runner. Now, Pestigore has normal movement allowance, normal agility, normal strength. Nothing interesting in the stats. They again have Nurgle's Rod, which every player on the Nurgle team does. They also have regeneration. This means that when they do get injured, they have a chance to just automatically heal the injury, and if that works, they go straight back into your reserves. Whoever injured them, if somebody else did injure them, is still going to get the credit for the injury, so you still get skill points. but it makes it really hard to kind of keep them off the field because they might just get healed anyway. Now, the drawback for that is that you'll see here, Nurgle teams do not get an apothecary. So they have to rely purely on this regeneration to do the work for them. That means that, again, if the Rotter here, which does not have regeneration, gets injured, there's nothing they can do about it. Another special thing that the Pestigore has is the Horns mutation. Right off the bat, essentially this just means if he blitzes, he counts as 4 strength instead of 3. This can be really nice for breaking through enemy lines, you know, getting the 1-up on a player that you'd otherwise have a little bit of difficulty with. That means that your Pestigores can make good ball runners because of their movement allowance and the skills that they have access to. Or you can also make them pretty effective blitzers and killers if that's what you want to build them into. Now, let's see, how many... You can have 4 Pestigores on a Nurgle team, so it would be very easy to do that. Have multiple Pestigores that are set up for different skills here. Now, before I move on to the Nurgle Warrior, another note about regeneration. Now, normally, you're kind of stuck with what you get with regeneration. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Now, before a match on a team that uses regeneration like this, some of the undead teams do this as well, where you don't have access to an apothecary. One of the inducements that you can buy before a match is an Igor, and if you get an Igor, that will allow you to re-roll a regeneration roll. So it still wouldn't allow you to save a player like the Rotter here that doesn't have regeneration, but you can use that as a sort of pseudo-apothecary just to play it safe. But you can only purchase it as inducements, so something to be aware of. Moving on to Nurgle Warriors. Now these guys are probably the most important player on a Nurgle team and a Chaos team, which is very similar. The thing about these Nurgle Warriors is that they start with 4 strength, making them very good hitters. 2 agility, can't really run the ball, but they have some nice mutations to start with. First off, they have Disturbing Presence. What this does is a radius of 3 tiles away from the player is going to be this zone. And any enemy player that is in the zone suffers a penalty to any pass or catch rolls while they are in this zone. This makes them really effective at playing against teams like, say, High Elves that would really want to be passing the ball a lot, because they can use these guys to mark those important players and reduce the odds that that's going to happen. They also have Foul Appearance, which is a nice defensive mutation. Basically what this means is every time that somebody attacks this player, there's just a 1 in 6 chance that they don't even get a roll for an attack. They choose to do nothing instead because they look so gross. You can re-roll this. Like I said, it's only a 1 in 6 chance, so it's not the most reliable ever, but it could be pretty annoying for whoever you're playing against to want to try and knock this guy out of the way. Foul Appearance pops off, they don't even get a chance to roll. That won't result in a turnover for whoever it affects. It just completely cancels the action. Then again, Nurgle's Rot, regeneration. Same skill access as the Pestigore, just general strength mutation. You'll notice that so far, or across the board really, Nurgle does not have access to agility skills. So you may be wondering, you know, how are they supposed to make somebody that's an effective ball runner or somebody who's able to pass, blah, blah, blah. And that's completely through mutations. There are skills in the mutation tree that will allow you to do stuff like that. Not quite as good usually as getting an agility skill instead, but you know, they can help fill that gap. Then the final player we have on the Nurgle team is the Beast of Nurgle. This is a big guy. 4 movement allowance, 5 strength, pretty typical of a big guy, 1 agility, not surprising, and 9 armor. So he also starts with Disturbing Presence and Foul Appearance for his mutations, as well as Tentacles. Now this is a nice ability here. This makes the Beast of Nurgle really capable of locking people in place, especially players that would normally be able to dodge very reliably. They struggle against Tentacles here. Basically, it uses your strength against the strength of whoever's trying to make the dodge, and if it goes through, they just don't move. They don't get knocked down like they would if you tripped a dodge, but it stops them from getting out of your tackle zone. That can be really, really annoying. against say like an elf team who has high agility but pretty middling strength across the board. So that can be really helpful if you can keep your Beast of Nurgle in the right places to stop the right people. Also has Mighty Blow. That's pretty typical for a big guy. More damage, meaning that you have a higher chance to break armor and a higher chance to injure when you do, which is always nice. Also has the really stupid modifier. What this means is that every time he takes an action, there is a 50% chance that he will just do nothing and lose all of his tackle zones. Can't catch, can't pass, can't do anything. The way that you kind of help with this is that if he starts his turn with another friendly player right next to him, they kind of act like a handler, and that brings that chance down to 17%. So only a 1 in 6 chance that happens. This is pretty common on big guys. You know, if you look back at the last video, you'll see that the Croxahor for the Lizardmen team had Bonehead, which is similar. You know, it's something you just get used to when you're playing a team with a big guy. You have to account for this being a possibility. So, as much as you want to be using the big guy every turn, or you might think you want to anyway, sometimes it's better to just not do anything and not risk losing all of his tackle zones. Because the other problem with a big guy like this is that he has this loner trait. What this does is that if you use a team reroll, there is a flat out 50% chance that team roll does nothing. So you have to first account for the fact that your team roll might do anything, and then if it does do something, the reroll might still be bad. So in general, when you have a player with loner like this, you don't want to be using rerolls on them if you can help it. It's usually just not worth it. Being a big guy, you can see he has regular access to strength skills, not general skills. Big guys usually don't. If you can get a block on a big guy like this, it's usually pretty good because it opens up more opportunities for you to hit players. But that can be hard to get. Also notice that he doesn't have normal access to mutations, so he's not going to be getting more mutations like the other players on his team unless he rolls doubles. If you were to get, say, Claw on this Beast of Nurgle, that could be deadly because you could turn him into a Claw Palmer, which is slang for Claw, Pile-On, Mighty Blow. It's a combination of 3 skills, 2 of them being in the strength section there, that makes for a really effective killing machine. So if you were to roll doubles on the Beast of Nurgle, get Claw, level him up a few more times, and, well, actually just one more time because he already has Mighty Blow, get Piling On, that could be a devastating guy that could just annihilate anybody that he wants. But not too much talk about that because I don't want to get into builds right now. Alright, well now that we have the kind of overview done, let's go ahead and start the replay and take a look at how this went. Like I said, I was watching this as it happened, and I was talking to both people who were playing. I noticed a couple things. Oops. I noticed a couple things that probably could have done better, but overall I thought it was a pretty good match. What am I doing here? There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Alright, first off with the coin flip. Nurgle is receiving. Go ahead and let the Bretonnians sit up here and we can take a look at the plan. Important thing to note that I didn't mention is that considering we do have 4-minute turns in this tournament, you know, these turns can end up being, these matches I should say, can end up being a lot longer than these replays would otherwise suggest, but you know, who knows how much thought went into each move. Alright, let's see what we're working with here. So he's got his linemen right on the front. That's good. Like I said, these guys are made to get hit. This is kind of what they're meant to do. He knows that the opponent is going to be a bashy team. He's going to be trying to make a big push, knock people down, and get the ball to the end zone. And you want to slow that down as much as possible. Bretonnia is... They're an interesting team. They're not well suited to agility, and they're basically just a human team, right? So they don't have a whole lot of strength, but... You know, they can take a hit and they can throw a punch, and they're not going to do too badly. Maybe a little bit on the fragile side, but, you know, they can hold their own. So, I wouldn't say they feel comfortable fighting a bashy team, but it's not the end of the world. Especially since there are 5 players on the enemy team here, technically 6 if you count the Horns mutation for the Pestigor, that are going to put his players over 3 strength. You need to account for the fact that, just like the last match, he is going to be probably losing a lot of the blocks overall. Nurgle is going to have a much easier time punching. So you need to basically slow the advance of the Nurgle team as much as possible, especially since Nurgle's receiving right off the bat. The fact that you offend on your lineman is really nice because he's going to be punching with these Chaos Warriors, he's going to be punching with the Beast of Nurgle, but he's not going to be able to follow through on it. So if these guys get hit, you could stand them right back up, and now they have a whole new line, just one space back. It makes the advance of the Nurgle team very, very slow, and is ideally what you want, because what Nurgle otherwise would be doing is punching and following through on every punch and just slowly advancing every turn, getting people moving forward. Now, since the Nurgle team doesn't have block on any player to begin with, even their Chaos Warriors, or their Nurgle Warriors, I should say, it is nice that the Bretonnians have Wrestle and a block on the Blitzers, so they have 7 players here that kind of fill a nice combat niche, able to, reduce the odds that the Nurgle team is actually going to be able to deal any significant damage. So I like having the lineman on the front here. He knows they need to control center, knows that he needs to slow people down. He's got people on the wings to cover whatever comes up. I will say probably should have moved these players up a little bit, especially these 2 in the back. They could be doing a little bit more. I do remember when the Bretonnian player set this up, he said that he was having an issue where he couldn't move his camera, which he ended up resolving before the first turn. But when he made this formation, I don't think he was actually able to move these guys. He was having some kind of issue. But that got fixed. But assuming that wasn't the case, yeah, I probably would have put one of these blitzers in the middle to support either side, and then you can kind of set your guys up along the edges of the field to, again, kind of make this wall and slow their advance. Since these guys are already going to be higher strength than you, you don't want to start off your turn, since he's going first, the Nurgle player that is. As Bretonnians, you're not going to want to start your turn with your players right in their tackle zones because you're giving them free hits. So you'd probably put them like 1 back, maybe move this blocker up here, this blitzer right here, and that way they're using their tackle zones to stop the advance of the Nurgle players, and if Nurgle does want to hit one of them, he has to come to them and do it and waste his blitz. Other than that, not much to say here about the Bretonnian formation. Take a look at how Nurgle sets up. Okay, as you can see, very front-heavy formation. He's got his 4 Nurgle Warriors ready to go. He's got complete dominance over the center of the field. He has his Rotters set up in a way that they are marking these edge linemen. So now these linemen are not giving strength bonuses to their neighbors, which will allow the Chaos Warriors... I keep saying Chaos Warriors. They're the same thing as the Chaos Warriors, really. It makes it so these Nurgle Warriors are getting easier blocks on the linemen right in front of them. And once they hit them, ideally, since they're not going to be following because of the defendability, now they're going to assist the Rotters in hitting these guys on the edges. So this is a really nice, easy 4 hits right here for the Nurgle team. But I mean, they're linemen. It's the beginning of the game. You have to have players on the line of scrimmage to have a valid formation, so not much you could do about that, right? This guy's Chaos Warriors on the side, ready to go in and get some hits and open up a way for, ideally, his Pescore here to bring the ball. Now, one thing to note here, which was pointed out immediately when the match started, is that we start off with rain. Now, rain is a weather effect that makes it more difficult to handle the ball, catching, intercepting, or pickup. Now, considering that the Pescore only has 3 agility, which is average, that's already, I believe, a 67% chance to pick up the ball, now going down to 50%, which is, not great. And you're going to see in action how, important a part the weather can actually play in a match in just a moment. Start off with a kick. High kick. First off, that's a really good kick by Bretonnians. You don't have a lot of control without a kicker, but this is pretty ideal. When you do get the kick ability later on a player, you normally want to try and send your ball to be into one of the corners of the field, because that's going to be the most inconvenient spot for any of the other team's players to actually get the ball. So This right here, really nice. Pestigore moves in with the high kick. Ball comes down, and he fails the catch roll. Look at that. He had to roll a 5 or a 6 in order to catch that because of the rain. Normally that would be a 4 or higher, which is a 50% chance. But because of the rain, that's just, that's nasty. First hit with the Beast of Nurgle, you'll notice that he got a both down roll here. Take a look. He got skulls and a both down. Now, normally in this kind of situation, you would want to re-roll that, but as we talked about before, the Beast of Nurgle has Loner, and it's just not worth using team room rolls on players that have Loner, honestly. Does this result in a turnover, though? Yeah, it does. It does result in a turnover, which is really bad for Nurgle. But considering he only has 2 rerolls, it's the first turn of the game. He has a nice line here, nothing to worry about. It's really the choice to take. Now, it did work out for the Nurgle player in that he got an injury on this lineman. But his Beast of Nurgle got knocked out, which is one of the worst things that possibly could have happened. However, injury on Jimothy, missed next game. And immediate turnover. So now we have the Nurgle player down to, we have 10 players on either side. Beast of Nurgle is going to be out till it wakes up. The way that knockouts work is that every time there is a new drive, so after a touchdown or halftime, there is a, I believe, 50% chance that any knocked out player will wake up. It's all individual rolls for each player. But, that knockout could last just for the play, could last for the whole game. You never know. And then we have over on the Bretonnian side here, you'll notice in his dugout, he actually started with 2 extra linemen. So the fact that his 1 lineman just got injured, not the end of the world for him. He's got some backup players in reserve. So at the start of the next play, he's going to be able to pop one of those guys in. And if that Beast of Nurgle doesn't wake up, suddenly he has a player advantage. So, all things considered, that both down, did he take an injury on his player? Yeah, he did, but his player was worth 40,000. That Beast of Nurgle is worth quite a bit more. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's probably going to be over 100k easily. Probably like 150, maybe. So that actually worked out pretty well for the Bretonnian player. Of course, then he starts here, and he makes a red die block. Now, red dice is what happens when you make an attack and you have lower strength than your opponent. In this case, the Nurgle Warrior has 4, the lineman has 3. He's not getting an assist because of the Rotter right here. Red dice is not ideal, because what this means is you roll the dice, and then the opponent that you are attacking is the one who gets to choose which die actually takes effect. In this case, it worked out pretty well for the Bretonnian player. The result was a push and a stumble. Stumble would have been a knockdown in this case because no dodge, so of course the Nurgle player selected push instead. That would have been the best option for him, so pretty lucky roll for the Bretonnian player. What I would have done here is probably take this blocker here, or any of these other players in the back, whoever would have been best for the situation, and you would have moved him over to the Rotter on the left here. That way you could mark the Rotter, you could hit with this lineman, he would have a 2-die block, knock that Rotter out of the way, don't follow, and then your lineman is now assisting against this Nurgle Warrior, and now this lineman at least has a 1-die block, which you still don't really want to do, because as we talked about in the last video, 1-die blocks are not good odds if you don't have at least wrestle, but preferably block on your player. But it would have been better than red dice. I would say that red dice in general you want to avoid at all costs. And in fact, I would actually say that in this situation, considering you're using your linemen, linemen are not about getting hits. Linemen are about being in the way. Linemen are about helping out other players. They're not about doing the dirty work themselves. They're made to be beat up. They're made to be a nuisance. You have your lineman currently covering 2 of his most important players, players that are not going to be able to make a dodge roll, players that the only way they're going to be able to leave that situation is if they knock down your lineman. So my suggestion would have been, honestly, don't make that lineman do anything. Just let him stand there. He's doing enough work by standing there because he's stopping that Nurgle warrior, which is, I think, 100k or something like that. With a 40k unit, that's good value. You're keeping him occupied. He doesn't get maneuver as the Nurgle warriors. So I probably would have just left that. You have to bear in mind that Bretonnians are not a bashy team, and they're not going to be getting as many injury rolls as something like these Nurgle players, especially considering Nurgle teams have above average armor. You need to focus on wasting their time, getting the ball, going for touchdowns. Don't worry too much about punching because that's not where you're going to get your skill points. Gets the push. Doesn't follow through. You know, if you got that hit, follow through with your lineman. Again, have your lineman be a nuisance. Have your lineman occupy that Nurgle warrior. Because now what you've done is you've pushed the Nurgle warrior out of the way. He's now free to go wherever he wants. Ideally, you don't want that. One die block on the Rodder, gets a hit. Alright, that's nice. You push the Rodder out of the way, and now you have this nice little line here that you can run your blitzers down to get into the other side of the field and head towards the ball. Puts blocker in. And ends turn. I think this is also before he was able to fix that issue with his camera. I can't remember. I would definitely say if it weren't for that, there would have been a really nice play to be had here, moving your characters down through that break in the line. So unfortunately, he didn't really get a whole lot of that free turn that he was given. See, the Chaos Warrior, you see what I'm talking about here, where Nurgle wants to be hitting with these Chaos Warriors, but because he wasn't right next to one, he's going to have to move in and hit him, which is not ideal. And I'm going to tell you right now that a Nurgle team's prerogative, being that they're a bashy team, especially for first match of a league, is going to be getting as many skill points as possible. So he wants to be dishing out the injuries, because the sooner that he can level up these Nurgle warriors and get them more skills, the better. If he levels those guys up even once, he's going to get Mighty Blow, which is going to allow him to dish out even more injuries, get more mutations, and very quickly these guys are going to turn into devastating, murdering machines. So the Nurgle player is definitely trying to get all the skill points on these Chaos Warriors that he can. Anyway, you'll notice that he made all of his moves, comes back to try and pick up the ball, waited to pick the ball last because he knew that was probably going to be the riskiest roll, and he didn't want to suffer a turnover and lose the rest of his turn. So very wisely made all the safe moves first. You should always make your safe moves first, save your risky moves for the end, because that way, even if you fail it like right here, you don't lose your whole turn. Opted not to re-roll because it's really not worth it when you only have 2. Back to the Bretonnia team. Moves the Blitzer in because the Dauntless proc. 1d6. Unfortunate. Rolls the 1d6, and even though he had blocked, again, that would have been really good. Not really good, but only 17% chance of that happening. Could have used a reroll there. Honestly, probably should have used a reroll there in order to try and avoid that. I believe the Bretonnians started with only 2 rerolls. Let me just check real quick. Thomas. Yeah, I think it would show the reroll on there if he used it. Something you could have done there before you made that blitz move. You had a blocker right here. Move him to the corner of that Chaos Warrior, then blitz in. That makes it a 2-die block. To give you an idea of how helpful that is, in this situation with the Blitzer having the block skill, that 1-die block, he has a 1 in 6 chance of failure, right? If he made that a 2-die block by moving this guy in first, that goes to 1 in 36 chance of failure, because that's there's only one outcome where you have 2 skulls, and then you could still reroll on top of that, so you still have a very good chance of not hurting yourself if you have those 2-die blocks. Probability is very important in this game. I linked an article in the Discord that kind of goes over various dice probabilities in Blood Bowl, and I really suggest that everybody kind of glance at that and just get an idea of what are safe moves, what are risky moves. Because again, is that 1d6 chance of failing, or 1 in 6 chance of failing when you're on a 1 die block, is that safe? Not necessarily. It's not the worst thing in the world. But compare that to a 1 in 36 chance of failing, it's a pretty significant difference. And I think even if you do have players like this with block who can be fighting on 1 die, you should still be trying to get 2 die blocks wherever possible. Because now we're moving on to the 3rd turn, and Bretonnians effectively haven't done anything yet. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to the next turn. Nurgle player is moving in, starting to mark some players that he wants to keep out of the way. You can see he sees this gap in the middle of the field right here. So what he's doing with his players is he's marking the Bretonnian players so they can't maneuver in a way to stop him from going up this part of the field. He knows that if he gets the ball, he's just going to bring his Pestigore up this way and route him right here. Now these Rotters in the way, these guys are not free to move without punching first. They can't stop him from doing that. You can see here the way the tackle zones show. Pretty simple. Unfortunate roll, had to use a re-roll there. Okay. And you'll notice that he pushed here to the sideline. So this is something important to think about when you are trying to take enemy players off of the team, right? You could do that by injuring them, by knocking them down, and another way that you could do that is by taking them and pushing them off of the side of the field. This is an automatic armor break. They could get knocked out, they could get injured from it because they get attacked by the crowd. But more importantly, regardless of what happens, they are off the field and they are gone for the rest of the play. Assuming they don't get knocked out or injured, they just go back in reserves right here for the next drive, but that's still really nice for you because now you have one less player to deal with. So in general, if you can force enemy players to the side of the field to knock them off like this, great. And avoid putting your players there unless they have a way to get out of it, which is kind of a niche circumstance, so I'm not going to worry too much about explaining that right now. But the Nurgle player knows that he wants to knock players off and get rid of them. So he's just setting up for that next turn. Once again, goes to pick up the ball. Once again, fails. That's Rain for you. That is how bad Rain is. He's failed to pick up the ball 3 times in a row. Weather can be devastating. Start off with a blitz. Gets a good hit on the Rotter. Alright. Moves his guy around, and you'll see now the reason he did that is he took that Rotter out, frees up this Blitzer to now assist with a hit on this Chaos Warrior. Then he takes the Blitzer that he hit with, finishes his movement by going over here to also assist on the Chaos Warrior so he can attack with his blocker. So now this blocker has 3 strength, he's hitting an opponent that has 4 strength. The opponent is getting a +1 from this Rotter right here, which is turning it into a 3 versus 5, but now he's getting 2 more strength from his buddy Blitzers right here that are helping him out, which is making this a 5 strength on 5 strength block, turning into a 1 die block. Because he has Wrestle, in this situation, 1 in 6 chance of knocking himself down, pretty good. So, good move there from the Bretonnian player. Rolled foul appearance, sorry. Failed, had to re-roll, passed foul appearance again. Again, foul appearance just makes it so he doesn't do anything, was not acceptable in this situation. Gets the push, and he gets his player off the sideline. So now that this player is off the sideline, he's freed up this Blitzer to move wherever he wants to move, and he doesn't have to worry too much about that guy getting knocked off. Stands his player back up, starting to stand all of his players back up. In general, you probably want to do this at the beginning of your turn. I would say that the very first thing you should do is, you know, in the spirit of making all the safe moves first, just stand up anybody that needs to be stood up. You can do it by double-clicking on them. You can even move them afterwards if you want to. They just suffer a 3 movement penalty from standing up. So unless you would also have to have them make a roll for some reason, maybe you wanted to move them in a way where they'd have to dodge, standing them up is just a good thing to do, because now, even if you do get a turnover, these guys are at least marking other players and actually doing something. And he's just trying to keep all these players marked and keep them under pressure. I would say one thing maybe, probably could have moved this blocker over to the left to help out with this group a little bit more. Not a whole lot going on the right now, and this blocker is, you know, you moved him from like here to here, and it doesn't really change anything. You know, the ball is still in the back, so as far as the middle of the game is concerned, this is kind of just a punching match. What I would be trying to do as the Bretonnian player, honestly, I would have taken this blitzer, and I think there would have been a dodge roll involved. Probably could have moved this blocker over here and assisted the lineman to hopefully knock this rodder out of the way, and then you could have moved your blitzer around this way through that gap and work his way towards the Pestigore. Because the ball is in a horrible place for Nurgle right now, and he's trying to get it out of there. This allows you to potentially go and sneak it, and it's very unlikely that any of his players are going to be able to easily get out of these tackle zones to stop you. So when you had a free prayer like that, I would have started setting him down. Nurgle goes for the first hit, once again knocking a player back to the sideline. He really wants to knock these guys off the edge. Easy hit, stun. Doesn't get a follow through though, now that Rodder's freed up. Rodder moves in and he's wrapping around the back. He's trying to reinforce this safe lane here and stop the Bretonnian players from coming in to help. Now he's also marking this lineman. Another hit, another stun. This Rodder's freed up now. Moves in, marks the blocker so he can't be going anywhere. You see what Nurgle's trying to do is he's trying to just preoccupy these Bretonnian players because he knows that he's going to win the punches and he doesn't want them to maneuver in a way that's going to stop him from doing what he wants to do. So, very smart by the Nurgle player here. Goes to pick up the ball, 4 turns in, still hasn't picked up the ball. That's life. That's rainy weather for you. And unfortunate, 1 in 36 chance that's going to happen, you know. But it happens. Gets hit, hurts himself, turnover. Probably were safer moves to make before that, potentially, who knows. Looking here, is the most important thing getting that player off the sideline? Not necessarily, but at the same time, it would have been hard to get any kind of strength advantage the way your players are set up here right now. Looking... Maybe it could have been better to hit with a blitzer. Possibly. You wouldn't be able to follow through and get your blocker off the sideline, but then maybe he could have moved afterward. I mean, you could have hit with the blitzer here, and then could have hit with this blitzer to hit that rodder, knock him towards the sideline. If they both get knocked down, then suddenly this blocker's free to move. You know, potentially opening him up to actually move again down towards the Pestigore in the back. The rest of what's going on here is just working, honestly. There's not really any good fight to be had on this side of the field at the moment. It's kind of critical that these guys get freed up so they can go assist. Now, did he hit himself and knock himself down? Yes. Is that a bad thing? Yeah, but on the other hand, now that he's prone, he actually cannot get knocked off the side of the field. So, in a way, this player is actually kind of safe. He doesn't have to worry about him getting sidelined now, so. Back to the Nurgle player. Chaos Warrior moves in, starts marking, lining up hits for the next turn. Gets a hit on lineman. You can see he's trying to get hits with these Chaos Warriors every turn. He wants to be dishing all the damage he can and get all those skill points. Hitting those linemen is the best way to do that since they have the lowest armor. Oh, injures one of the blitzers. That's unfortunate. No long-term effect, though, so that's only going to be for this match. He'll be back next match in perfect health. The Bretonnia player did not bring an Apothecary, I believe, because blitzers are expensive, and that was one way that he could fit 3 blitzers into his team, how he made this, and have enough rerolls. Typically, you don't really need an Apothecary on the first match. It's a little bit of a risk, but more than likely you're not going to need it, and it's pretty easy to get one in the second match anyway. So wraps the Rodder around, goes to hit this blitzer. Now he's got 2 people on the sideline. And the last thing Bretonnia wants right now is to have these guys go off the edge. He's just going to suffer losing more and more players until he's going to be at such a disadvantage in player count that there's no way he's going to be able to control the field. Goes to pick up the ball, and he finally does it. Turn 5, Pescor's finally picked up the ball. Okay, let's pause for a minute. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, what is the Bretonnia player supposed to do here, right? I mean, they're up against a team that's higher strength than them, and they're just getting hit every turn. It seems like it's really unfair and uneven. How are you supposed to get out of this situation? Well, to be honest with you, I think that we're at a point in the drive where it's unlikely Bretonnia is going to get out of this situation. But like I said, 2 or 3 turns ago, I think what needed to be done is you need to identify where that break in the line was. Again, it was roughly about right here, seemed the best bet considering you had 2 blitzers over in this area. You could have knocked one guy out of the way and started moving on towards the ball carrier. Because as much as Nurgle wants to sit here and punch you all day and farm injuries if he can, the name of the game is touchdowns. You know, touchdowns are what wins the match. And when you had the ball right next to the enemy end zone that entire time, if you could have gone one guy over there, hell, you possibly didn't even need to hit the goat man. You could have just picked up the ball, you'd be in the end zone. That's an easy touchdown. That would have been 3 skill points on probably a blitzer. You could have probably knocked the goat man off the side of the field, depending. You know, lots of stuff could have happened. I think what you needed to do was somehow get 1 or 2 players out of the way, get them moving down the field, and have them putting pressure on the ball, because that's what's going to distract the Nurgle team from doing this, is if you start putting pressure on the ball. Like, the defense was good, but what were you defending against? Does that make sense? You know, like, you're occupying the entire team here, and you're defending them from pushing up the field, but they don't even have a ball to bring yet. We're 5 turns in, he finally got a hold of the ball. And when you're playing defense, you're not defending against the team, you're defending against the ball. So that's really what kind of mattered there. So, putting pressure on the ball, that's really what's important in my opinion. So again, right here, you'll see that he is standing up all of his players. He's set up this player here, who is now unmarked, didn't move him. I probably would have immediately started moving this guy, again, around, down towards the ball carrier. Same here with this lineman. He's unmarked, move him towards the ball carrier, get in the way. Like, you have a couple players here that you just stood up and had the possibility to start putting pressure on the ball. Fairness to the Bretonnian player, I think he said to me that he didn't realize he could stand up and move in the same turn. That happens, but now if you're watching this, you know. The only penalty from standing a player up is that they lose 3 of their movement. So he would only be able to move 3 normal spaces, then another 2 spaces going for it roll. But, you know, that can still get you pretty close to the ball carrier. You just gotta start moving people over, you know? Alright, Nurgle player sees that gap on the right side of the field, so he's going to go and try and exploit it. Still getting hits where he can. If I had one thing to say here, it might be for the Nurgle player. I wonder if it would have been a better choice to move this Nurgle warrior over to the left and have this Rodder take his place, because all that these two are doing over here is just stopping these guys from standing up at this point. Like, there's no... These two players, if they stand up, they're probably going to get sidelined. So you're just stopping them from being a nuisance. And I think it's more useful to have a Rodder do that job than have your Nurgle warrior that you're trying to get injuries with. And as we said, typical of a Bashy team, just going for all the hits that he can. Okay, Bretonnia's turn. Let's see what we got here. Stands up his players again. This guy has 3 movement because he just stood up. Could have moved him here, here. That's 3, 1, 2. That would have been going for a roll, but if you were to do that and he would be over here, he's now kind of working to help block that gap that the Pestigor wants to run down. So that's one thing that probably would have wanted to do there, is you want to think about if you can block where your opponent is trying to go. I probably would have moved that guy over. Or if you're not going to do that, you could have moved him right here to help with this Rodder that you're now attacking, so this wouldn't be a 1-die block. Again, 2-die blocks wherever possible is really what you want to see. But to be honest, with all the dice rolls in this match, Bretonnian player actually had quite a bit of luck. These 1-die rolls went pretty well for him across the board. Lots of following on these hits going on, which I think is not what you want to be doing at this point, because it's really important that you start freeing up players to stop the touchdown. Manages to push the Chaos Warrior out of the way. Very nice. Gets him off the sideline. Still have the Blitzer on the sideline, which is kind of risky. I don't know if I would have stood him up, but he is marking the Rodder now. Go-Man's going to run through, as expected. And you see what Nurgle is doing now is he's moving his guys around and behind the Bretonnian team so they can't break off now. He doesn't want them getting in the way, trying to stop his ball carrier. And again, this is something you really want to think about once you break through the enemy line with the ball, is you don't want them disengaging and coming back around. So you want to get a guy or two in around the corner using their tackle zones to stop the opponent from coming and responding to your advance. In this case, having the Rodders right up on people is probably worth it, but sometimes that might just mean having them spaced out in a line diagonally like this, let's say, just kind of using their tackle zones as a wall, so they have to walk all the way around if they want to stop you. Now, let's just think for a moment before we see what Bretonnia does. Well, let's look at the position that Nurgle is in. He's got a lot of guys enveloped, and he has his Pestigor within range for a touchdown. It's going to be 2 going for it rolls, but that's still in range for a touchdown. So we have this kind of present threat right now that Bretonnia needs to be acutely aware of, I would say, in that... like, most important thing right now, get in the way of that Pestigor, hit that Pestigor, doesn't matter, just stop him from scoring. Knocks one guy out of the way, hits the Rodder, pushes him to the side, he blitzed, which enables him to move right in front of the Pestigor. Very nice. Now that Pestigor has to either attack or deal with a dodge roll there. So that's pretty good for the Bretonnia player, actually. Considering that there's only 1 turn left on the Nurgle team, that's the exact kind of response that you want. Ideally, you would have wanted to find a way to hit the Pestigor, but I don't think that was going to happen. Unfortunate rolls over here, turns over, but you got a blitzer right on the ball carrier, so things are looking kind of okay right now. Especially since he doesn't have an easy way to support the ball carrier with his attack. Nurgle knows that, so immediately he's hitting that guy to free up the Rodder. So now that Pesticor has an easy 2-die roll against the blitzer. And unfortunately, gets the turnover. Probably, I would say, you know, considering it was the last turn of the drive, even though there's this incentive when you're playing a Bashy team like this to try and get your hits with your Nurgle Warriors every turn because you're trying to level them up, I think that was probably just not worth it because the most important role was getting the blitz out of the way, getting the touchdown. I don't know, that might just be my philosophy, but I think if it's my last opportunity, the touchdown is all that matters. Screw everything else personally. So unfortunately, Nurgle is not going to get a touchdown here. There's that red die roll coming to bite Bretonnia in the ass. Like I said, he picks the skull. Alright, that's the end of the first half. Pretty simple stuff. Beast of Nurgle does not wake up. That's pretty bad for the Nurgle team. 2 down on the Bretonnian team, but you remember he had those 2 linemen in reserve. So right now, actually, the Bretonnian team is going to be starting this half with a player advantage. Alright, Bretonnia is going to be receiving this kick. Nurgle knows this, so he's set up a line all the way across the field. He's saying, okay, if I'm going to be defending, there's going to be a fight happening. So he's set up his players in a way, once again, he's going for punches. Okay, let's watch the kick. Weather change? Yep, we got a weather change. Alright, that rain's gone. And bad kick. That's a touchback. Really good for Bretonnians. Gives it to his blitzer. That makes sense. Blitzer is going to be your best ball carriers. Now, let's take a look at the formation of the Bretonnians real quick. So, when you're playing offensively, one thing you need to think about is that you're going to get the ball and then you need to make a play somewhere. So typically what you want to do is have some of your guys spread out in a way that you can stop the enemy team from maneuvering, but then you want to try and focus all of your offensive pressure with your other guys towards one spot, making a break in the line, wherever that may be. In this case, the ball was a touchback. He opted to give it to his blitzer back here. So he's probably going to be playing towards the left side of the field. You know, moving his blocker over. That one as well, moving his blitzer over, using them to bust open this relatively weak position, actually. It would not be that difficult to get a blitzer in here, hit this Nurgle warrior, knock him to the right. Suddenly, you have a bit of a safe lane that you can move the ball down. You could start advancing, form a cage right here, that sort of thing. Another thing to consider is that I would call having a formation where you have guys in the back of the field like this when they're kicking to you. That makes sense because you need somebody to go retrieve the ball. However, since this ended up being a touchback because the Nurgle team kicked outside the field, he gets to give the ball to whatever player he wants. Doesn't matter where they are, doesn't matter if they're marked, they don't have to make a catch roll. They just get the ball. In this case, I would have given it to this blitzer. The reason for that is that he is freed up. He's right in the middle of the field. He can go wherever he needs to go. He's a good ball carrier because, again, he's a blitzer. He's got block. He's going to be harder to take down. And now he doesn't have to waste a turn moving across the field like this guy does. You know, now you have to spend an entire turn moving just to the halfway point on the field, whereas this guy, he's right up on it. Make your whole blast right through, you know? So when you get a touchback, that's kind of what you want to be thinking about, is giving it to a player that is in a position to make an aggressive play like that. And potentially also to a player who wouldn't normally be able to pick up the ball. I mean, it's a guaranteed chance to grab the ball when it's a touchback. So let's say that Nurgle got the touchback, right? You might want to give it to one of your Nurgle warriors, honestly, because they're not likely to pick up the ball normally. But if you give them the ball now, they can bust open the defensive line, head for the end zone. If you get a touchdown with your Nurgle warrior, that's 3 skill points. So something to think about depending on what team you're playing. It can sometimes be worth it to give the ball in that situation to a person who otherwise wouldn't normally have it, especially if they have skills that are good for it, like block. Immediate 1-die block gets the push. Once again, 1-die block's kind of scary. Moves his blitzer. Only a few spaces, though. I'm not sure about that. I mean, at this point, I don't think there's any reason not to move your blitzer all the way up to, say, right here. You know, it would be very easy to put your blitzer... I think he only moved 3 spaces. I'm not sure. I think he could have moved either here or here. If you could have moved here, let's just say, you can easily start moving your free players over. Those 2 guys, this guy, and make a cage. A strong defensive cage on this ball carrier, even for a bashy team like Nurgle, would have been very difficult for him to break. It would have been a nice, solid position for you to start advancing up the left. Instead, he ends up going for punches, gets a both down, loses his turn. Definitely should have moved other players first. Should have moved this blocker. Like I said, should have moved the blitzer a little bit more. And probably should have blitzed with this guy to get this Chaos Warrior out of the way. Something like that. Now, let's take a look at what Nurgle has to deal with after that move. Nothing, pretty much. I mean, as you can see here, Nurgle can just hit that lineman out of the way, or hit that lineman out of the way. Next thing you know, there's a big fat opening. Send your Pescore in, he can go straight on the blitzer. No problem. Start sending other players in as you free them up. You know, especially if he hits this lineman with his Nurgle Warrior, that's a free rodder right here that he can move in on the ball carrier. You can move your Pescore in on the ball carrier. So this is now immediately a very good position for Nurgle, because he has basically nothing to contend with on the right side of the field because it wasn't reinforced, and he could just easily make a move on the ball carrier. And I imagine that's what he's likely to do right here. You'll notice that he's pushing players to the left because he knows that's the side of the field that doesn't matter right now. So he's trying to clear this opening. You always want to think about when you're pushing players around, where you're pushing them to and why you're pushing them there. And again, in this case, it's purely because he's just making an opening. Moves that rodder in, just like I said. Rodder's right on the ball carrier. Opts to hit the lineman with the Pescore, but he blitzes. Oh, moves him back. Probably could have just moved the Pescore in. Alright, comes over. Takes out the rodder with wrestle, so now the ball carrier is once again free. Now, unfortunately, now Bretonnia is in a position where going down the left side of the field is not as easy as it once was, because you have 2 Chaos Warriors that are blocking the way, and it's going to be difficult to knock those guys down. What he could do here, of course, he blitzed with the blocker, so this is, you know, it's kind of too late to do that. Could have tried for a dodge roll. Could have been risky. Let's see, that would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Could have moved the blocker here on this Chaos Warrior. Move the Blitzer with a Blitz to hit this guy. Knock him out of the way with Dauntless. That would have been a 2-die block. Would have been risky on the dodge roll, but you do have rerolls, so it's possible that moves the ball up the field. And you could start hitting this Rotter right here with the Blitzer, free up this lineman to come over and assist after that. Kind of see where I'm going here. Start moving players towards the side of the field that you're trying to push down. So that lineman's free. Alright, goes over and marks. Probably a good move. Trying to slow these warriors down. Alright, so let's play out here. Let's talk about what he just did here, because I remember this specifically when I was watching. So we talked earlier about how these Nurgle warriors have this disturbing presence trait, and you can see it radiating off of them here. And this is a stacking debuff, by the way. If you're in 2 of these, it's a -2 modifier to all your pass, catch rolls, all that kind of stuff. So what he was attempting to do here is that he wanted to get his player onto the other side of that zone so that he could make a pass and potentially go behind the enemy lines. In theory, it's not a terrible idea. However, I think there are probably a couple of ways that he could have done it better. Namely, first of all, when you make a pass, there are 3 different distances that are kind of like set in brackets of certain ranges. It's possible that if he moved his player closer, just to the edge of the zone here, that would have gone from a long pass to, say, a medium pass, and he would have innately had a higher chance of having it succeed. Also, what he could have done... Oh, whoops. What he could have done right here is you can see Rotter's already on the ground, Blitzer's already free. You can run over to this guy right here, do a handoff, which is only a catch pass. You know, it's only a catch roll, there's no passing roll. It's technically a pass, but it doesn't like count as one. And giving the ball to the blocker. Would he have that -1 chance to catch because he's in the zone? Yeah, but you're also eliminating an entire roll from the equation. So I'd say that taking that -1 modifier, which I think would bring it down to a 50% chance, instead of having to make 2 rolls that are potentially much harder, probably would have been the way to go. Then you could have had the blocker with the ball moving his way up here. The blocker almost certainly would have gone hit the next turn, but at least then the ball is on the opponent's side of the field so that you are not, you know, you're making headway. But instead you make this pass and now we have a turnover, which is not ideal. Alright, Nurgle starts again, stands up his players, as is good practice. See, he's got an easy hit right there to get somebody outside of the field. And he takes it, sidelines a player, now Bretonnia is down a player. A guy didn't get injured, but he's going to be out for the rest of the play. Also moved a Nurgle warrior down here to stop this blocker from picking up the ball and running. Very smart. He's going to head over here, and he's just going to try and take him out. Again, pushes him onto the ball. This is a little bit risky right here, I would say. The reason for that is when this player lands on the ball, that's going to scatter the ball into one of the adjacent spaces, and if it scatters off the field, it just gets kicked back in at random. You have no idea where it's going to go, which, you know, could be good for you, could also be really bad for you. Luckily, it ends up pretty much exactly where he wants it, gets the catch, perfect. Opted to end his turn there on the side of the field because it's not really a risk given the situation. Nobody's going to come and push him off, so. And you can see again with these hits that he's still forcing players to the left side of the field because, again, he knows that he's going to be making this play towards the right for the touchdown. Or at least so it seems right now. And so it's in his best interest that he knocks the enemy players away from where he's trying to go. Alright, back to Bretonnia. Stances players up. Gets a hit, knocks down the Rotter. I probably would have blitzed with that one so you could have hit the Rotter and then moved your blitzer in to come over and support these guys, hopefully. Something like that. Gets a push on the Goat Man. Not what you want, but not a failure. You can see what he's trying to do there. Moves the lineman in to come and reinforce. That's good. Keep moving. Notice also that the position of this lineman is going to be exerting tackle zones right here. See? So now it's just a little bit trickier for Nurgle to get more players from over here to come help out the ball. So he's applying pressure to the ball. This is good. This is good. I just think it probably would have been better to blitz with this guy and move him forward rather than blitzing with the blocker. All right, not a bad turn. Oh, let's pause here. Okay, okay. Real quick, I kind of missed it a little bit there. But this Nurgle warrior is now attacking this blocker that's on the ball carrier. So this is an important thing to understand when you are trying to knock people off the edge of the field. So when you hit a person and it moves them, you choose from the 3 squares behind them. In this case, it would be here, here, and here, because it's a diagonal attack. And that's where you get to push them to. You always have to push them to an open square unless all 3 squares are occupied, in which case you can push to whichever one you want, and then whoever is in that square also gets pushed to whatever square you want. Now, in the case of sidelining, if you were to attack from a diagonal like this, it's going to force you to go to an open square that's on the field. But because of this diagonal angle, the only open square is currently occupied by the ball holder. So by default, this guy right here is going off the side of the field. And he gets a KO. Also an important thing to note real quick. When you do sideline people like that, there was just a KO, but let's just say that it resulted in an injury, which would normally give skill points. Sidelining people, even if it scores an injury, does not give skill points because it counts that armor break and all that damage is being done by the crowd, not by the player that attacked. So it is not a viable way of getting skill points for your players. Just something to think about. Keeping the rest of the Bretonnian team occupied. Goes for the blitz over there. Gets a hit. You can see he's kind of bringing him more to the center because he's got these Nurgle warriors defending him. So it's unlikely Bretonnia is going to get guys into those gaps. So this is probably the safest way for the ball carrier to go right now. And now we're actually trending towards having most of the Bretonnian players towards the right side of the field. So the play is actually going to move over to the left side of the field for the Nurgle player. And he knows it. Another hit. One die block against a warrior. Gets a push. Probably not the most important move to be making right now. Gets a wrestle over there. Granted, this is kind of difficult to crack open right now. He's got players off the field. He's definitely at a disadvantage, so. Pescor is gonna head towards the left of the field. Probably going to run up the center, but I imagine he's thinking about how these blitzers are and this blocker are still standing, so they could potentially take some hits and then come over to assist. So keep heading towards the left of the field because that's where the Bretonnian team isn't right now. And again, just reinforcing his position with those tackle zones. You can see now the way that he has his players set up, you kind of have this nice little like shield wall that's going on, stopping the Bretonnian players from having any possibility of coming around from this direction and engaging with the ball carrier. Could have some players come from the back here, because that is a weakness, but given that these are linemen, they don't have a whole lot of movement, and they're not very strong to begin with. I mean, this guy, let's see, he's got 6 minutes, make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Technically, this guy right here could move over here with some going for it rolls and mark the ball carrier, just forcing him to do a roll to get him out of there. Considering it's a lineman, maybe worth it. I mean, are you hitting the ball carrier? No, but you're forcing him to make rolls, which he always has the potential to fail, and that's kind of important to think about. So that probably would have been one thing you could do there. Getting people onto the enemy ball carrier is always important, whether you're hitting it or not. Instead opts to go for the blitz here. Okay, goes for the push. And unfortunately, this is a misplay. The blitz is fine, pushing that guy out of the way. That's totally fine. But what he should have done is stayed in the position that he hit from, and instead he could have freely moved diagonally and then move in right into the tackle zone of the ball carrier, forcing him to make a roll, as we just talked about. Because he followed through on that, now he's stuck in this Rodder's tackle zone, and he's not engaged in the ball carrier. If he wanted to make that move now, he himself would have to make a dodge roll, which is, of course, suboptimal. So, and he's likely to fail with only 2 agility. So, almost the right thing to do. Going back to the Nurgle team. Once again, he's setting up because he wants to sideline. He's not going to bother blitzing with the Nurgle warrior, though. He doesn't want to. And starts going for the hits. Just eliminating more and more players. This is what a bash team does. Double skulls, re-roll, gets the hit. And you can see he moved back there because he doesn't want these linemen coming through. Because now you're using your tackle zones to stop that. And at this point, you know, we're at the point in the match where it kind of devolves into a brawl, and that's about it. The problem here is that the Bretonnians are on the losing side of the brawl, and they're not going to make it the winning side, especially with a roll like that. Oh, and we have a death. First death of the league. Now, luckily for the Bretonnians, it's just a lineman, and he had 2 extra linemen. If anybody on your team is going to die, that's the one you want dying, so not really that much of a loss. But you notice that the Nurgle's Rot effect here on this Nurgle warrior actually activated, and now he's not going to... Is he going to show up? Let me see. Okay, I'm not seeing him in the dugout, but that player that's dead would now become a... at the end of this match, becomes a free player for the Nurgle team to purchase for the next match. Alright, so something interesting here. The Pestigore didn't go for the touchdown. Why? Well, he's got 3 whole turns left. This is a Bashy team, and he's trying to get as many skill points as possible. You can see that he kind of understands right now that he has the advantage, and he's very likely to get that touchdown, but he has a couple turns to do it. He doesn't need to do it right now. So what he wants to do is actually draw this out for as long as possible so that he can keep hitting these players and potentially get more skill points. And this is something that when you're playing in a league like this, you have to think about, because you're trying to level your players up as much as you can, and that will allow you to get the advantage later in the league. Going for a roll failed, re-rolls. Gets the hit. So sometimes touchdowns aren't everything. He already knows he has the victory in hand. He's just going to go for more points. But knowing when and where to actually do this is really important. Hubris is definitely a thing in this game. And there have been many times when I try a strategy like this and screw myself over. So, that being said, the Bretonnia team right now kind of has to think about, well, he's taking a risk by not scoring a touchdown right now. Is there potential for me to actually stop him? Right now, no, but considering he has 2 turns to do it, there might be a way to set that up. Let's see what he does. He gets hit by a red die. Okay. Also a thing to note, if you're doing this thing that Nurgle is doing right now, where you're trying to draw out the match, I would say that when it comes to your final turn to do it, if you are making any rolls and not just going for the touchdown that final turn, you are asking to lose. So this is the last turn that he should be engaging in any kind of combat. Alright, gets the both down. Blitzer gets that block. Very nice. Okay. Real quick. Let's pause. Let's imagine that you are the Bretonnian player. I'm not going to get rid of this because I don't want to show what happens. But let's just say that you're the Bretonnian player in this situation. Okay? You got the guy right by the end zone here. And here's your players. Is there anything that you can do? You know? Do you see any opportunity if you're watching right now? Let you think about it for a second. Okay, there's one potential thing that could be done here. And it's this blitzer right here. Now that he's freed up, he has 7 movement. He can make 2 going forward rolls, so he can move a total of 9 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That would have put him just close enough to mark the ball carrier. Is that going to guarantee knock the ball carrier down? No, it's not. But again, it's not always about guarantees. It's about taking the chance to stop this victory. Because if you force him into a dodge roll, he has no rerolls left. He's got 3 agility. That's going to be a 67% dodge roll. That means he has a 1 in 3 chance of failing that dodge if you can get that guy up there, right? So, you might get lucky. You might be able to stop him from scoring, and you might be able to turn this into a draw, which is better than a loss. So, it's always worth taking the chance. Here he takes the chance, and he stripped, so it doesn't matter. Which is unfortunate, but again, like, you have to take those chances when they come up, because even if that didn't work out, that was still the move to make, honestly. And then we go for the touchdown, and Nurgle wins 1-0. Simple as that. Alright, and that was Nurgle versus Bretonnians. If we look at the end here, skill point gain, Nurgle definitely came out on top. However, when it comes to the MVPs, he got 5 skill points on a Rotter, which is just about the worst player he could get on, so that's pretty much near wasted. Whereas Bretonnians got their MVP on one of their Blitzers. MVPs are randomized, of course. Blitzer is the best player he could have gotten that on, so... I mean, all things considered, it was going to be a rough match for Bretonnians. I do think there are some plays that could have helped. I think there were even some touchdown opportunities if you started pushing some of those aggressive strategies I was talking about, going through those gaps in the line. That would have maybe changed the outcome of this match. But it's a new player league, and unfortunately, the Nurgle player here is one of the few other people in the league that has prior experience, quite a bit of experience actually, just like me. So that was an unfortunate matchup, but I think the Bretonnians actually did very well considering, and that could have been a much, much worse match for them. Was there a death? Yes, but it was on alignment. Doesn't matter. There were 2 injuries. One of them isn't going to matter for next game. The other one is the person missing that game, and again, I think it's alignment. We can go ahead and check their team here just to see. Yeah, just the lineman missing the next game. And again, he still had extra players anyways, so he's still going to be able to field 11 players. And honestly, even if he wasn't able to field 11 players, the game forces you to take journeyman linemen for free, which are exactly the same as normal linemen, except they have that loner trait I was talking about that has to do with the team rerolls. So all things considered, nothing too bad here. The one unfortunate thing is that when he made his team, he spent 10,000 on a coach assistant, which means he's now at 40k from his winnings after that match, which means he doesn't get to buy an apothecary, and that's unfortunate, but not the end of the world. Go ahead and take a look at the Nurgle team real quick, and you'll see right here, Dole Jules. That was the lineman that he killed next match, is now thrown onto his team as a free Rotter. Now, whether or not you want to take these when you're playing this kind of team, it depends. On one hand, yes, he got a nice free extra player that he can use. On the other hand, even though he got it for free, that's still adding 40 team value to his overall team value. So when he goes up against a team with lower value, they're going to get more free money to spend on inducements. In this case, since he's at 1,050, and most teams are going to start at 1,000 in this league, as you can already see looking at this, that means that potentially they're going to get at least 50 grand in inducement money, which is enough to buy, Bloodweiser Babes, nothing too crazy. If he goes up against a goblin, that could be enough to buy a bribe, which could shake things up a lot. But it's something you want to be aware of, monitoring your team value. Is it worth having that extra team value when that player's not necessarily bringing anything to the table? Something to think about. Anyway, that's that match done. I hope it was informative. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. And yeah, have a good one.